Why, hello, fellow Patriots, and welcome back to the Patriot Dad channel, where we can discuss current events and modern issues, all while keeping it as real as possible. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the United States' withdrawal from Afghanistan and how badly it went for all the parties involved. In the coming weeks, I will be doing a small series on this topic, including a watch and reaction to the hearings in the US House Foreign Affairs Committee. And I also may have the opportunity to do an interview and or Q&A session of some sort with a person who is on the ground at the end of this conflict and who still knows people that are trapped in Afghanistan. Let's get into the public opinion first from Pew Research, and then we'll get into some of the reporting and a release of a document from the current administration's White House on how the Afghanistan withdrawal went. That one should be rich, because I'm pretty sure we all know what their opinion of their performance will be. This video will be a little bit on the longer side, so just bear with me. I will also be adding chapter markers for your convenience. So the first thing we have is from Pew Research that at the time of the military evacuation, 54% of Americans said that the decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan was the right one. Now, this is supported by the poll that you see here on the screen. Now, this is a slight majority of the people that agree that the withdrawal was the correct decision, but there's a more significant majority think that we did not accomplish our goals. And if you look at whether we accomplished our goals or not, a more significant majority think that we did not accomplish our goals there. 69% of the people polled here say that we failed in achieving our goals in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, only 27% say that we succeeded. I don't know what those goals really were. Do you? I mean, I helped support this conflict, and I don't even know what our goals actually were, so I don't know how I would even answer this. But in my opinion, we should never have been there in the first place. But since we were there, I don't think the ending shows that we succeeded. We retreated, and I think we failed. And even more surprising is the percent of the people who thought that this administration did a poor job at the withdrawal. So if you look at the percent who rate the job of the administration in the handling of Afghanistan, you see that 42% say that they did a poor job. And if you add in the 29% that think that they did a fair job, that comes to a total of 71% of people think that the handling of Afghanistan do not think that it was excellent or good, which is eye-opening for sure. And then in the same survey, we see that 69%, nice, of US adults think that the United States mostly failed in achieving its goals in Afghanistan, and only 27% say that they succeeded. So this we talked about before, but even more surprising is how divided we are and how tribal opinions on government successes and failures really are. If you look at Republican conservatives, 89% think the Biden administration handled Afghanistan poorly, while only 16% of liberal Democrats had this view. That disparity is quite astonishing and just goes to show that in America, we care more about the letter that's behind your name than the job that you're doing. That's just plain silly to me. I don't understand it. So how did the withdrawal go? Well, The Guardian has a few things to say about that with an article from July of this year titled "Scathing Report on U.S. Withdrawal from Afghanistan Blames Trump and Biden." Now, I'm kind of surprised that they blame Biden at all for this, because the tendency of the news has been to just blame Trump for this. But during the withdrawal, an Islamic State suicide bomber killed 13 U.S. service members and more than 150 Afghans outside of the airport gate. This loss of service member life is the basis for the reaction that we did, that you can find up here in the corner from Samson's song 46 equals 13. And as a subscriber to my channel pointed out in the comments on that video, the title to this song is a reference to the 46th president, or President Joe Biden, and the loss of 13 service members during the Afghanistan retreat. Interesting little tidbit. Thank you for that comment. It's always nice to get comments that are that helpful. Now, some 125,000 people, including nearly 6,000 Americans, were flown out of Kabul before the last U.S. soldiers departed on the 30th of August in 2021, as the Taliban consolidated their grip on Kabul after the U.S.-backed government fled. That's just a shame. The speed at which the U.S.-backed Afghanistan force collapsed and surrendered was not predicted and was well beyond the planned for worst-case scenario by a mile. As we retreated, we left behind scores of U.S. citizens and supporting allies, including at-risk Afghans who had supported the U.S. during its occupation of Afghan territory and its support of the U.S.-backed Afghan government. Now, finally, here the Guardian states that the senior administration officials also failed to make clear decisions regarding the universe of at-risk Afghans to be included in the evacuation by the time it started, nor had they determined where Afghan evacuees would be taken. It's astonishing. We left without a good plan. Now, sure, the Biden administration could say that the Trump administration gave them a date and didn't have a good enough plan to support that date. But in the end, the Biden administration chose to stick with the date and chose to execute this with almost no plan. So is it really the fault of the Trump administration and the Biden administration? Or should the Biden administration be taking full credit on this? Because they're the ones who ultimately triggered the evacuation. What are your thoughts? The United States was also heavily invested in Afghanistan and hoped that that investment would pay dividends and not end in the dismal failure that it did. You look here at this AP article, and the AP article states that we built and trained at a 2-decade cost of $83 billion. Afghan security forces collapsed so quickly and completely, in some cases without a shot fired, which is amazing, but also shows how untrained their forces really were, that the ultimate beneficiary of the American investment turned out to be the Taliban. They grabbed not only political power, but also US supplied firepower, which was guns, ammunition, helicopters, and more. I mean, I know I would love to have some taxpayer-funded helicopters, armored vehicles, and guns. I mean, throw a couple of those my way. I'll gladly park them in my yard. And what do we get? And what could that money have been used for instead? Well, here the AP kind of breaks that down for us. The $83 billion invested in Afghan forces over 20 years is nearly double last year's budget for the entire U.S. Marine Corps, and is slightly more than what Washington budgeted last year for food stamp assistance for nearly 40 million Americans. We spent and ended up wasting more money than we spend feeding 40 million people. That is a staggering amount of money. And in the end, how much equipment did we actually leave them? Well, the AP kind of tells us here that there is no definite information on how much U.S. equipment was left behind, but that the Taliban seized U.S. supplied firepower from Afghan forces who surrendered it to them. Though no one knows the exact value, and we never will, U.S. defense officials have confirmed that it is significant. That's probably a significant understatement, because while there's no official tally, not that I would trust one if an official tally came out from our government, because our government is about as reliable as a car with a hole in its oil pan. But that loss of our investment, it transferred all of that investment directly into assets to the Taliban. That's a loss. That's a loss for America. And we're already seeing the consequences in Israel, as we discussed in our video, Fighting Our Own Equipment. I mean, this happens every time. I don't know why we keep doing it. It's like, also just recently, there was a report released from the White House that goes into some detail on their perspective of how things went. Interesting. So President Biden and his team were well aware of challenges posed by withdrawing from a war zone after 20 years, especially under the circumstances which they inherited. Again, let's blame Trump. The departing administration had left the Biden administration with a date of withdrawal, but no plan for executing it. After about 4 years of neglect and in some cases deliberate degradation, crucial systems, offices, and agency functions that would be necessary for a safe and orderly departure were in disrepair. So here we have setting up that we were going to blame somebody else for the failings of this administration. Wonderful. So on the evening of the 26th of August in 2021, a suicide bomber detonated an explosive outside Abbey Gate at Hamid Karzai International Airport, killing 13 service members, 170 Afghans, and injuring 45 other service members. Now, we skip down to the end of here. He was advised by Biden, that the threat to U.S. forces was manageable and to continue until August 31st to maximize evacuations of Americans, allied forces, and Afghan partners. Now, what in the hell does the threat being manageable mean when you just a few days prior had had a suicide bomber detonate, killing 13 service members? How is that manageable? I don't understand. And then they go on to tout their own horn and say that during the evacuation, 70,000 vulnerable Afghans were evacuated by the US government to overseas Defense Department facilities for secure screening, vetting, and administration of public health vaccinations. I mean, that's good. We got some people out, so that's a plus. But at what cost? We'll see. Despite the predictions to the contrary, we have and will continue to facilitate departure and resettlement of our Afghan partners through enduring welcome, our multi-year effort to relocate those who worked with us and for us to the United States through a variety of legal immigration pathways. So also good. There's still a plan there to try and get people out that supported the US while we were there. Commendable. Ultimately, after more than 20 years and more than $2 trillion and standing up an Afghan army of 300,000 soldiers, the speed and ease at which the Taliban took control of Afghanistan suggests that there was no scenario except a permanent and significant expanded US military presence that would have changed the trajectory. So they're basically saying that nothing would have kept this from happening. Even if they had delayed it, still would have had the same result. This final admission speaks volumes to me. I'm a little surprised they didn't choose permanent occupation, as it would have allowed them to continue their conflicts in the Middle East much easier. Of course, we now know that the attack on Israel, you can see our video on that as well, and our constant push to attach Iran to that attack means we're probably going to be firing up the old war machine here pretty soon and getting back to more conflicts in the Middle East. I mean, why not? It gives them a reason to make politicians' friends rich so they can be paid to make the bombs that we're going to drop on someone's kids over there and on tanks that we can leave behind for the locals to use against us later. Now, to round out this analysis of our failure in the Afghanistan withdrawal, the Brookings Institute did a small breakdown of this White House release in stating that it is true that former President Donald Trump's Doha deal with the Taliban was incredibly flawed and that it limited President Joe Biden's options. Many of us noted at the time that it was badly negotiated, giving the Taliban everything they wanted, a date for America to leave Afghanistan, while asking for very little in return besides counter-terror promises. It excluded the Afghan government, while the deal's architect argued that its multiple pieces, one of which included the start to peace talks between the Taliban and then Afghan government, would work together. The text as it is written read like a timeline to surrender. It's emboldened the Taliban and weakened the Afghan government. The public has never seen its classified appendices, and I'm not surprised, and they probably never will, because the government is never going to show you how the sausage is made, because the sausage, if you knew how it was made, which is with the bodies of our young soldiers, nobody would want it. They also go on to say, though, that it's also not quite correct to suggest that the Trump administration alone is to blame for how the summer of 2021 unfolded or the harried nature of the last 2 weeks of August in Kabul. Biden and his team had agency in the decision to withdraw in 2021 and in the manner of the withdrawal. I completely agree. They could have delayed it. They could have postponed it. They could have done something different, but they chose to do it. And the roots of the fall of the Afghan government and the army in 2021 went beyond the Doha deal. They were deeply reflective of the ultimately unsuccessful 20-year American effort in Afghanistan. Any honest reckoning with the events of August 2021 is incomplete without acknowledging that. Now, I greatly appreciate Brookings Institute for being that, I would say, impartial, but at least showing the other side of the argument, because that's something that you will never see from the mainstream media normally. In the end, this retreat from Afghanistan was handled quite poorly, left US citizens and partner allies in harm's way. It also transferred an untold amount of military hardware into the hands of the Taliban. I wish that Pew poll from before had had a category worse than poor, because I would personally rank the handling of the Afghanistan conflict resolution as catastrophic at best, not just poor. Thank you for those of you who made it to the end of this video. I greatly appreciate your viewership. Please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. If you want to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell icon so that you can be notified when I upload new videos. Please share the video with friends and family. as you see fit to help spread the knowledge and information shared on this channel. Leave a comment below if you have a recommendation for a future topic, or if you just want to see something different on the channel. I'm always looking for critical feedback. Next week, we're going to be doing a breakdown and a reaction to the video of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on this withdrawal. I hope that you all have a great rest of your week. Take care, God bless, and bye for now. Go ahead and check out one of the links on the screen now to either subscribe to the channel and see the rest of the videos of the channel, or one of the carefully selected videos that you may wish to see that YouTube has used its algorithm to select for you.